On Christmas Eve, I heard my own son whisper, "Just pretend we're not home. She'll go away." I stood on his doorstep holding the papers that would have made him a multi-millionaire. I turned around and took the $29 million surprise back with me.
I always thought betrayal would feel loud. I imagined slammed doors, shattered plates, a storm of accusations. Instead, it arrived as a whisper behind double-glazed glass on the Upper West Side, soft as falling snow. "Just pretend we're not home," my son said. I was standing below his bay window, my hand still resting on the brass door knocker, snowflakes melting into the wrinkles of my knuckles. From upstairs, I heard his wife's voice, flat and irritated. "Ethan, your mother flew across the country without asking. Again? We have investors here. I am not pausing dessert for this." There was movement, the scrape of a chair. "We'll deal with her later," Ethan muttered. "Turn off the porch light, close the curtains. If Mia sees her, she'll beg to let her in." My granddaughter's name stung worse than the cold. The porch light blinked out. The warm golden square of the window shrank as the curtains drew together. Outside, the city glowed with fairy lights and shop windows and careless joy. Inside that townhouse, I'd just been erased with a switch. I stood a moment longer, snow soaking the hem of my good wool coat. In my right hand, I carried a tin of cinnamon stars and vanilla kipfurl I'd baked the night before. In my left, the small black carry-on that hadn't left my sight since I boarded the plane in Phoenix. Inside that carry-on was a red leather folder. Inside the folder were documents my son didn't know existed yet. The deed to my desert house, a full transfer of my stock portfolio, control of a technology trust currently valued very conservatively at $29 million. I'd come to surprise him, to hand it over quietly on Christmas Eve while the tree glittered and the grandkids tore at wrapping paper. Not anymore. The wind cut through my coat. Somewhere down the block, a child shrieked with laughter and someone called, "Careful, the ice!" I turned away from my son's door. The suitcase wheels squeaked over packed snow as I walked back toward the avenue. I didn't ring again, didn't text, didn't knock like some desperate beggar asking to be let in. Halfway down the brownstone steps, the zipper on my carry-on slipped a little. A corner of the red folder peeked out, its gold notary seal catching a stray glint from a distant string of lights. I stopped. One gloved hand smoothed it back in place. "This was almost yours. You locked the door on it yourself." I straightened, lifted my chin into the stinging wind, and kept walking. That was the night I stopped being just Mom and became again the woman I had been long before anyone called me that. They always tell my story starting from the wrong chapter. People like to begin with, "Evelyn raised her son alone," or "Evelyn is so good with numbers, she helps at the church bake sale," as if arithmetic and apple pies were the height of my abilities. Nobody starts with, "Evelyn designed the fault tolerance protocols for the first civilian air traffic automation system." Doesn't sound very grandmotherly, does it? I was 20 when I wrote my first serious line of code. 23 when the FAA hired our team to tackle their most terrifying nightmare. What happens when one tiny component fails while 300 people are 30,000 feet in the air? Back then, computers filled entire rooms and smelled like hot dust. We fed them cards with holes punched in them, an absurdly fragile way to hold life and death. In theory, my team leader had said, tapping the side of his mug as we pored over schematics. This system must assume that every part will fail eventually. Our job is to make sure the plane doesn't. I took that idea to heart. Redundancy, backups, fail-safes. I built logic trees where no single failure, no single bad decision could bring the whole structure crashing down. We tested our code on clunky simulators whose screens flickered and hummed. Sometimes we slept on the office couches. Once I woke up with keyboard marks pressed into my cheek. It was the best time of my life. Of course, you've never heard my name. They buried women like me in acknowledgement sections, if that. My mother used to say, a good woman doesn't need credit. It should be enough that you know what you've done. For a while, I believed her. Then Ethan was born, and the men in the department congratulated me as if I'd just completed my last project. You'll want to stay home now. Babies need their mothers. Nobody said babies also need rent or food or a future. They reassigned my work temporarily. The temporary period lasted forever. I left quietly, of course. I had a child to keep alive and a husband spiraling into debt and drink. Nobody in HR cared that my unfinished algorithms could shave 12 microseconds off a response time. They cared that I was now unreliable. So I took my quiet brilliance home with me. While Ethan napped, I ran test simulations in my head. When my husband passed out in front of the TV, I sat at the kitchen table with secondhand manuals and taught myself about the stock market, about options and indices and early software companies going public. By the time my son was 4, I had a side account no one knew about. By the time he left for college, that side account had more commas in it than the household checking account ever had. I didn't live lavishly. My couches were old, my shoes sensible. I shopped clearance sales and clipped coupons. I didn't need the world to see my wealth. I needed to know that if everything else failed, I wouldn't. Children think you appear the moment they need you. They don't wonder what you were before. To Ethan, I was always just there. I was there when his father's liver finally gave up and the medical bills eclipsed our income. I was there when the guidance counselor said state college might be more realistic, and I quietly wrote a check that made his first choice realistic after all. I was there in the bleachers at every science fair, clapping louder than anyone. But he never once asked, "How did you afford my textbooks, Mom?" or "How do you know so much about differential equations?" It never came. He graduated with honors in computer engineering. At the ceremony, he hugged me tight. "Couldn't have done it without you, Mom," he said into my hair. I wanted to answer, "You have no idea," but I just squeezed back and told him I was proud. He got a job in a New York firm developing optimization software for logistics companies. You'd be surprised how much of my old world you can repackage and sell under different acronyms. He worked hard. He was charismatic. He rose fast. He called every Sunday at first. "Hey, Mom, how's church? How's the heat in that old house holding up? Remember to take your pills?" I knew the pattern. I'd seen all those corporate sons before. Calls every week became calls every 2, then monthly, then "I'll call you when things settle down." Things never settle down when you're climbing. Then he met Lydia. She came from a different world entirely. Trust funds, boarding schools, the kind of familiarity with private jets that I only had with airport security instructions. She wasn't a bad person. She was just built for altitude and not used to looking down. The first time she visited my desert house, she walked through the front door, took one glance at the thrift store couch and the mismatched plates and the dying plant in the corner, and said brightly, "Oh, it's cozy." I knew then that in her mind, cozy meant beneath us. Over the years, the language hardened. She's stubborn. She refuses to move closer. She doesn't understand how busy we are. When I bought a secondhand tablet so I could video chat with my granddaughter, Lydia laughed. "That's adorable. Mom Evelyn is trying to be techie." Trying. I could write a concurrency control system in 3 languages, but to her, I was a grandmother pressing the wrong buttons. You become invisible one joke at a time. One unreturned call, one "will come out next year, I promise," repeated every year. You don't notice the light going out until one day you find yourself standing in the dark holding a lifetime of effort and nobody bothered to ask where the switch is.
People assume old women are either on pensions or living off their children. They don't imagine we might own pieces of the very companies their retirement funds depend on. I bought my first tech stock in 1984. The broker tried to talk me out of it. "Ma'am, these software outfits are risky. You sure you don't want some nice municipal bonds?" I was sure. I'd read the white papers, looked at the underlying architecture. I recognized the bones of my old work inside it, the same logic of redundancy and error handling. Those kids weren't guessing. They were building on something solid. I bought low. I held. I ignored every dip. I repeated this process carefully over decades. Whenever I had spare money, after Ethan's tuition, after the mortgage, after the assisted living bills for my mother-in-law, I tucked it into that quiet portfolio. I learned to read annual reports the way other people read romance novels. I enjoyed spotting the holes, the lies, the genuine innovation hiding behind buzzwords. By 60, the number in the corner of my brokerage account looked like a glitch. I called to verify. "No, Mrs. Hart," the woman on the phone laughed. "That's correct. You've done extremely well." I closed my laptop and made myself a cup of tea. Then I opened a new document and titled it Legacy Plan V1.0. It wasn't a grand dream at first, a scholarship here, a donation there, enough set aside for a comfortable assisted living if my joints finally rebelled. Ethan was in the equation, of course, so were the grandkids. He didn't know it, but I had always intended to leave him the bulk, not because he needed it, but because I wanted him to feel safe enough to choose meaning over money. I'd seen too many people twist themselves into knots chasing a number. I thought, if I can give him the security I never had, he won't make those mistakes. That was the plan, until the Christmas he couldn't be bothered to answer the door. The idea started small. At Thanksgiving, during my phone call that lasted exactly 7 minutes and 14 seconds, Ethan mentioned they weren't traveling for Christmas. "Too busy," he said, "and flights are insane. We're hosting a few people here. Investors, actually. Big deal for the company." Lydia chimed in from the background. "And the kids have school recitals. It's chaos, Evelyn. You know how it is." I did know how it is, actually. I just didn't know when chaos became a reason to avoid the woman who once worked 2 jobs while your father was in rehab. After the call, I sat at my kitchen table with my mug of tea and my legacy plan document open. I had spent the last year rewriting my will with a lawyer I trusted, a woman named Denise Stanton, who had started her career suing banks and now helped little old ladies like me keep what we'd managed to wrestle from the world. Denise knew about the $29 million. She was the only person who did. We'd structured it carefully for tax purposes, a sizable portion was earmarked for a foundation I planned to start, something quietly meaningful, grants for older women retraining into STEM fields, scholarships for kids from my dusty neighborhood in Tucson. But a huge slice was designated for Ethan and his family. Denise suggested the idea started small. At Thanksgiving, during my phone call that lasted exactly 7 minutes and 14 seconds, Ethan mentioned they weren't traveling for Christmas. Too busy, he said, and flights are insane. We're hosting a few people here. Investors, actually. Big deal for the company. Lydia chimed in from the background. And the kids have school recitals. It's chaos, Evelyn. You know how it is. I did know how it is, actually. I just didn't know when chaos became a reason to avoid the woman who once worked 2 jobs while your father was in rehab. After the call, I sat at my kitchen table with my mug of tea and my legacy plan document open. I had spent the last year rewriting my will with a lawyer I trusted, a woman named Denise Stanton, who had started her career suing banks and now helped little old ladies like me keep what we'd managed to wrestle from the world. Denise knew about the $29 million. She was the only person who did. We'd structured it carefully for tax purposes, a sizable portion with earmarked for a foundation I planned to start, something quietly meaningful, grants for older women retraining into STEM fields, scholarships for kids from my dusty neighborhood in Tucson. But a huge slice was designated for Ethan and his family. Denise suggested I discuss it with him. "You're talking about life-changing numbers," she said. "You're sure you want it to be a surprise?" I'd answered, "That boy has had a surprise from me every major moment of his life. Why stop now?" The next morning, I booked a flight to New York. "I'll fly in the day before Christmas Eve," I told myself, fingers hovering over the confirmation button. "I'll stay at a hotel, then show up that night with cookies. We'll laugh about how I ignored his warning about it being hectic. He'll roll his eyes but hug me. The kids will shriek. Lydia will tolerate it because she knows the optics of pushing a grandmother back into a cab." I pressed confirm. And then I called Denise and asked her to prepare the transfer documents. "I think I want to give him his share while I'm still around to see him use it," I said. "We'll set up safeguards, of course, vesting periods, but I don't want to be the ghost that drops a windfall. I want it to be a blessing with a face." She paused. "Are you sure, Evelyn? It's generous, but it's irreversible." "I'm sure," I lied, because at the time, I thought I was. The flight from Phoenix landed ahead of schedule. LaGuardia at Christmas is a particular kind of circus. People balancing pie tins and musical instruments and screaming toddlers. I moved through the crowd with the ease of someone who'd spent a career catching connections with minutes to spare. Outside, the air knifed into my lungs. I wrapped my scarf tighter, found a cab, and handed the driver the address like I'd done it 1,000 times. "Visiting family?" he asked, eyes on the road. "Yes," I said, "surprising them." "Aw," he grinned, "best kind of visit. They'll be happy." I smiled back, too polite to say, "Not necessarily." At the hotel, I checked in, left the red leather folder in the in-room safe, and laid out my clothes for the next day. On Christmas Eve morning, I baked. Yes, in a hotel room. I'd specifically booked a suite with a kitchenette. The oven was temperamental, but I coaxed it like an old code base, adjusting time and temperature until the first batch came out just right. By late afternoon, 3 tins of cookies cooled on the counter, cinnamon stars, almond crescents, and tiny orange peel biscotti. I wrapped each in parchment and tied them with string. Then I retrieved the red folder from the safe, checked every page, and slid it into the bottom of my carry-on. By early evening, the city was cloaked in soft snow. I had timed it perfectly. Enough darkness for the lights to glow, early enough that children would still be awake. The cab dropped me 2 blocks away. I wanted to walk the last bit to savor the anticipation. Their townhouse looked like a postcard. Wreath on the door, tiny white lights framing each window, the shadow of a tall tree twinkling inside. Through the bay window, I caught a glimpse of Mia spinning in a sparkly dress while her little brother Noah chased a toy train around the coffee table. My heart swelled so hard I had to stop and steady my breathing. I climbed the steps, straightened my coat, and rang the bell. The chime echoed inside. Laughter floated down the stairwell, music faint but festive, the clink of cutlery. Then quiet. Muffled footsteps approached the door and stopped just on the other side. I waited for the handle to turn. Instead, somewhere above me, a window creaked open a fraction. "Who is it?" Lydia's voice. There was an annoyed edge I'd heard many times, the sound of someone whose evening had been disturbed by something as vulgar as reality. My son's voice followed, low but clear. "It'll be her." My grip tightened on the cookie tin. He sighed, the sound carrying down like an exhale of frustration. "Just pretend we're not home. She'll go away." Lydia hissed, "Ethan, that's your mother." "Exactly," he snapped. "And if she comes in, she'll start fussing and talking, and Mia will get wound up, and the partners will think we're provincial." There was a pause. "Close the curtains," he added. "Turn off the porch light. If she thinks we're out to a restaurant, she'll go back to her hotel." My first thought was not anger, not even hurt. It was, so this is how far we've sunk. Grandmothers don't belong in curated lives, not ones like theirs. We don't fit the aesthetic. The porch light clicked off. The bright rectangle of the window dimmed as the curtain slid shut. I stared at the door a few seconds longer, then, with a calm I surprised myself with, I turned and walked back down the steps. Behind me, the music resumed. Somewhere between verse and chorus, I heard Mia's thin voice carry, "Daddy, was that Grandma? I heard the bell." Lydia's reply was too faint to make out, but I didn't need the words. I knew the script. "Grandma's busy. Grandma decided not to come. Grandma gets confused sometimes." Snow creaked under my boots. By the time I reached the sidewalk, the cold wind had dried whatever tears might have fallen. I did not look back. I didn't go straight to the hotel. Instead, I ducked into a quiet cafe still open on the corner of Amsterdam and 83rd. A bell over the door jingled as I entered, and the young man behind the counter glanced up from his phone. "We're closing in 20, he said. "Plenty of time," I answered, sliding onto a stool by the window. He brought me a cup of peppermint tea and a slice of whatever cake they were trying to get rid of. I nibbled at it mechanically as I watched families hurry past outside, scarves flying, cheeks flushed. I'd always imagined if Ethan rejected me outright, I would shatter. Instead, sitting in that overheated cafe with my suitcase at my feet, I felt awake, like I had been sleepwalking for years and someone finally turned on the lights. My phone sat silent in my purse. No text, no apology, no "sorry, Mom, we're in the middle of something, come back in an hour." Nothing. Fine, I thought, silence is data. And I know what to do with data. I pulled my notebook from the front pocket of my carry-on and opened it to a clean page. At the top, I wrote in tidy block letters, "Family Ledger Day 0." Underneath, I made 2 columns. In the left, I wrote "Observed Behavior." In the right, "Interpretation." I'm an engineer. When emotions threaten to drown me, I run diagnostics. I listed turned off porch light after hearing doorbell, closed curtains, no attempt to text or call, words, "pretend we're not home, she'll go away," concern, image in front of investors, assumption voiced, "she acts like she still has some place in this house." On the right side, I wrote carefully, "I am considered an inconvenience, not a guest. My presence is framed as a threat to his status. He believes I will accept being turned away. He is confident there will be no consequences." Then, at the bottom of the page, I wrote, "Conclusion. Ethan does not see me as a person with agency. He sees me as a variable to manage. Once you name a thing, it loses its power to sneak up on you." I closed the notebook. The kid behind the counter announced last call. I downed the rest of my tea, zipped my coat, and trundled the suitcase back out into the snow. At the hotel, I locked the door, set the "Do Not Disturb" sign, and placed the red folder on the desk. I opened it slowly. Grant deeds, transfer forms, trust amendments, Denise's neat lawyerly handwriting in the margins. I ran my fingers over the embossed seals. This was written for the son I thought I had, not for the man who just left his mother on a doorstep at Christmas to impress people he pays. I didn't cry. I took out a pen. On the first page, in the margin next to Ethan's name, I wrote in small letters, "Hold, re-evaluate." Then I picked up my phone and tapped Denise's contact. She picked up on the second ring, even though it was Christmas Eve. "Evelyn, are you all right?" "I'm fine. Better than I expected, but I think we need to refactor the legacy plan." She was quiet a moment. "I'm listening." I smiled, the first genuine smile of the night. "Oh, Denise," I said, "you're going to love this. It's going to be the most elegant piece of error handling I've ever designed."
Denise is 10 years younger than Ethan, but carries herself with the calm of someone who has watched too many grown adults light their lives on fire with a signature. We met when the credit union tried to push me into an annuity I didn't need. "That's predatory," she said bluntly when I showed her the paperwork. "They saw an older woman and thought, easy mark. Let me make some calls." By the time she was done, the credit union's branch manager had personally apologized and given a donation to the senior center in honor of Mrs. Hart's financial literacy advocacy. Everyone needs a Denise. On the phone, I gave her the concise version. Turned away on Christmas Eve, no misunderstanding, intentional, strong concern with investors' impressions, total invisibility. She exhaled through her teeth. "I'm sorry, Evelyn." "I'm not," I replied. "I'm clear. So, I want 3 things." "Go on." 1, immediate freeze on any transfer to Ethan personally. Keep the foundation portion intact. 2, I want to know if he's already tried to access anything in my name. 3, I want to design a structure where my assets can't be touched by anyone who considers me an embarrassment. "That last one," she said, "is going to be fun." We set an appointment for the 26th. She'd be in her office. I would catch the first flight back to Phoenix. "Until then," she added, "don't sign a thing. If he suddenly remembers how much he misses you and asks you to review some paperwork, stall." "I doubt he'll call." I was wrong. He called the next afternoon. The phone rang mid-afternoon on Christmas Day as I was working my way through a room-service turkey meal and a cheesy holiday movie. For a moment, I considered not answering. Then the engineer in me decided more data is always better. I swiped to accept. "Hi, Ethan." He sounded almost cheerful. "Mom, hey, we saw you dropped by last night." Saw, not heard, not turned away, saw. "I did," I said. "I thought I might surprise you and the kids." "Yeah," he said quickly, "about that. We were just heading out. Lydia's parents wanted to take the kids skating. I was going to call you to say sorry we missed you." Lying is just bad data. You don't get angry at it, you simply correct it. "You were home," I answered calmly. "The walls in those townhouses are not quite as thick as you think." Silence. Then, defensively, We had clients over, Mom, important people. It wasn't personal. Most cruelty isn't, I replied. That doesn't reduce its impact. He sighed. You're being dramatic. I took a bite of turkey, chewed, swallowed. No, Ethan, I'm being precise. Another pause. How long are you in the city? He asked finally. I fly back tomorrow. You could come by this evening, he offered. The partners are gone. It'll just be us. And what would I be walking into? An apology or a PR repair? That's not fair. Neither was leaving me on your doorstep. He went quiet again. When he spoke, his tone had shifted from defensive to coaxing. Mom, can we not do this over the phone? There are things I've been meaning to talk to you about anyway. Stuff about planning. A burden? I supplied. He sucked in a breath. You heard that too, huh? I hear a lot more than you think. He tried a laugh. It came out brittle. Okay, fair enough. Look, we can talk when you're back in Arizona. Maybe I'll come out for New Year's. We can sit down with someone and go over options. I could practically hear the PowerPoint slides in his head. Options like what? I asked. Estate planning, he said. Long-term care, conservatorship maybe. I mean, you're sharp now, but these things can turn fast, and it helps to have everything aligned. I've been reading up on it. For your benefit. For your benefit, the oldest pretext in the book. I already have a lawyer, I said. Yeah, we should probably sync with them, make sure we're all on the same page. There are structures where I could take some of the load off you, manage things, simplify. Take control, he meant. Cut you out of decisions, he meant. I looked at the red folder on the desk. At the moment, I said, I think the load sits exactly where it should. Mom, he protested, I'm just trying to help. No, Ethan, I said gently, you're trying to manage a variable you assumed was static. He didn't understand that sentence, not really, but somewhere under the surface, a part of him felt the ground shift. We'll talk, he insisted. Yes, I agreed, we will, on my terms. I wished him Merry Christmas and ended the call. Then I opened my notebook to a new page, and at the top I wrote, Family Ledger, Day 1, Post-Doorstep Behavior. And under it, in that neat hand my teachers used to praise, I noted every word. The day after Christmas, I flew back to Phoenix on an early flight full of hungover college students and exhausted parents. By noon, I was home, greeted by the familiar smell of desert dust and lemon cleaner. There's a particular relief in turning your own key in your own lock. After dropping my suitcase by the hall table, I checked the answering machine out of habit. Yes, I still use one. Digital voicemail is fine, but a physical blinking light somehow feels more honest. One new message. Robotic voice first. This is a courtesy call from, followed by the name of a bank I never used. We are attempting to reach Evelyn Hart regarding an application in her name. Please return our call as soon as possible to confirm details. My heartbeat slowed, then sped up again for an entirely different reason. Someone had tried to do something in my name. I replayed the message twice, wrote down the reference number, and dialed. The woman who answered sounded bored until I gave it. Ah, she said, papers rustling. Yes, Mrs. Hart, we flagged a recent application as potential fraud. We left 2 messages. I was traveling, I replied. What kind of application? A home equity line, $250,000 using your paid-off property as collateral. My fingers tightened around the phone. And how, I asked carefully, did whoever filed this acquire my deed details? She hesitated. It was submitted in person at a branch, Mrs. Hart, with your name and address. The clerk got suspicious because the applicant's ID looked recently issued, and the signature on the form didn't match the one we had on file. Do you have a copy of that form? I asked. Yes, ma'am. It's been frozen and logged. Good, I said. I need it, and I need the security footage from that day. I'm not sure we can release. You can if I bring a lawyer, I said, which I will. Denise's office was 5 minutes from the bank. By mid-afternoon, Denise and I were sitting in a too-cold branch manager's office watching grainy footage on a monitor. There, at a desk near the window, sat my son. He wore his navy pea coat, the one I gave him for his 35th birthday, and a careful expression. On the table in front of him lay my name in shaky, unfamiliar handwriting on forms he did not have the patience to copy convincingly. That, I believe, Denise said, is Exhibit A. My stomach twisted. Not with shock. I recognized this kind of move. I'd seen companies try to backdoor test changes into production systems. You flag it, you log it, you lock everything down. Freeze any account he might try to touch, flag his name, put notes on file that no power of attorney, no transfer, no nothing is to be accepted without me in person. The manager swallowed. I'm sorry, Mrs. Hart. Don't be, honestly. I'm delighted. Systems are working. Fraud was caught. Now we just expand the security perimeter. Denise leaned back in her chair, studying the paused frame of Ethan's face. You still want to leave him anything after this? She asked softly. I looked at the screen a long time. I think, I said, he just voluntarily took himself out of the primary beneficiary category. We spent the rest of the day at Denise's office, fueled by bad coffee and better rage. Let's start from first principles, she said, uncapping her pen. What do you want your money to do if we remove your son from the equation? I sat back and closed my eyes. I saw my younger self hunched over blueprints in a cramped government building. I saw my fellow women in the lab, brilliant and tired, whose names never made it onto patents. I saw my elderly neighbor, Maria, who'd once wanted to be a chemist and ended up cleaning houses because nobody thought Spanish girls belonged in labs. I saw the faces of the women in my church group who'd married young, raised families, and then found themselves widowed and financially illiterate, prey for any smiling advisor who promised to handle everything. I want, I said slowly, to make sure women like me never have to beg for permission to use their own minds. Denise's eyes lit. Now we're talking. We moved Ethan's share into a new structure, the Hart Foundation for Late Bloomers. Catchy, Denise said, typing it into a template. Mission? To fund education, retraining, and seed capital for women over 40 who were told it was too late. She grinned. I'll get you a board of directors that would make a hedge fund cry. And my house? I asked. We can put it into the foundation as well, she said. You retain life tenancy. You live there as long as you want. After you're gone, it becomes a retreat or a grants office, whatever you like, legally untouchable by family drama. What about the kids? I asked quietly. Mia and Noah didn't do anything wrong. Denise's voice softened. We can set up small, education-restricted trusts for them, locked tight, no parental access. They'll get them when they're old enough to handle it. Do that, I said, but quietly. No announcements. I don't want them transformed into bargaining chips. We updated my will clause by clause. Where Ethan's name had once appeared as primary beneficiary, we replaced it with the foundation. Under executor, we removed him as well. Denise glanced up. You understand what this means legally and emotionally. I do, I said. Emotionally, I already buried the version of him I was leaving this to. Legally, I'd like to make sure that burial is fully notarized.
When the last signature dried, Denise stacked the papers neatly. "I'll file everything tomorrow," she said. "From that moment on, if your son wants to take advantage of an older woman, he'll have to find one who didn't build fault-tolerant systems for a living." I slipped my copy of the documents into the red folder, and as I did, I felt something loosen in my chest. I had not cut him off in anger. I had simply stopped designing my life around the assumption that he would do the right thing.
Ethan called 3 days later. I was in the backyard, deadheading my roses, listening to the gentle hiss of a neighbor's sprinkler. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "Mom, I just got a very confusing call from your bank." "Did you?" I said, clipping a thorny stem. "They flagged me as a potential fraud risk," he said, indignation fighting with nervousness in his voice. "Me, your son. They said I attempted some application in your name. I was trying to set up a line to help with your expenses, future stuff." "Ethan," I said mildly, "you signed my name on a loan application without telling me." "It was going to benefit you," he insisted. "We could have modernized the house, gotten you live-in help. That area is not safe for you alone. You're being manipulated by some lawyer who—" I snipped another rose. "The footage shows you at the branch. The signature doesn't match mine. The bank did exactly what it should. It assumed a crime was in progress." "You're blowing this out of proportion," he snapped. "This is why we need that conservatorship conversation. You're reacting emotionally, not rationally." I let the silence stretch. "Ethan," I said finally, "do you remember what my first job was?" He sighed impatiently. "Something with computers, 1,000,000 years ago." "I built systems designed to prevent catastrophic failure. When you work in that world, you learn to respect small warning lights." He didn't respond. "This is a warning light. It tells me the trust layer between us has failed. When that happens in a system, you don't keep sending more sensitive data through. You shut it down and reroute." "Ethan, I'm rerouting. My financial path no longer goes through you." He laughed, a short, incredulous bark. "You're talking like I asked you for money. I didn't." "No," I agreed. "You tried to take it without asking. That's worse." "You are unbelievable. After everything I've done for you?" I thought about the mortgage payments I'd made quietly when his father died, the tuition checks, the emergency transfer the year his first startup crashed. "Of course," I said, "everything you've done." He hung up. I went inside, washed the dirt from my hands, and wrote "Family Ledger, Day 4, Defensive Maneuvers." Then I called Denise. "Prepare for phase 2, I told her. "I have a feeling he's about to escalate." 3 weeks later, an official-looking envelope arrived by certified mail. I signed for it, thanked the postal worker, and took it to the kitchen table. Thick paper, government seal, the kind of thing designed to make you feel small. I opened it carefully. It was a notice of petition for temporary conservatorship filed in county court. Petitioner, Ethan Hart. Respondent, Evelyn Hart. Grounds, concerns regarding declining mental capacity, susceptibility to undue influence, and mismanagement of finances. Attached was an affidavit in which my son described me as increasingly confused, forgetful, and easily exploited, citing among other things my unwillingness to consider her declining condition and sudden interest in giving away large sums. To whom, he didn't say. My hands did not shake. I put the papers down, took a sip of tea, and smiled a little.
Ah, I said aloud, there's phase 2. Then I picked up the phone. Denise, I said when she answered, the warning light just turned into a full system alert. Conservatorship? She guessed. Bingo. Okay, she said briskly. Time for you to show them what a supposedly confused old woman looks like when she's under oath. Before the court hearing, Denise insisted I get a full cognitive evaluation. It shouldn't be necessary, she said, but judges like shiny reports. Let's give them one that could double as a recruitment brochure for the NSA. Dr. Patel's practice was in a boring building near downtown, the sort of place where people filled out forms about allergies and step counts. In his office, he explained the process with gentle professionalism. We'll run through some questions, memory tasks, problem-solving exercises, he said. Nothing painful, just thorough. I nodded. Make it difficult, I said. I have a point to prove. He smiled. We began. Recall sequences, pattern completions, spatial reasoning puzzles, timed arithmetic. At one point, he hesitated and said, "You're doing these faster than most of my graduate student volunteers." I shrugged. Once you debug air traffic algorithms, Sudoku loses its charm. At the end, he sat back and reviewed his notes. "Mrs. Hart," he said, "I can say with confidence that your cognitive function is excellent. No evidence of dementia, mild or otherwise. In fact, you fall into a rather annoying category we call superagers." "Annoying?" I echoed. "For the rest of us," he clarified, smiling. "We look at your scores and wonder what we've been doing with our neurons." "How soon can I get that in writing?" "Tomorrow. I'll also record a video statement. Sometimes seeing the person makes a stronger impression than numbers on a page." "Perfect," I said. "I intend to be both quantitative and undeniable." The conservatorship hearing took place in a small courtroom that smelled faintly of dust and stress. Denise sat beside me at the respondents' table, a neat stack of binders aligned by her elbow like a row of patient soldiers. The red leather folder, now thicker, lay on top. Ethan sat across the aisle with his attorney, a man who radiated expensive confidence. My son looked tired. There were hollows under his eyes that hadn't been there on Christmas Eve. He kept smoothing his tie as if it might suddenly lie flat and make everything else orderly. Judge Morales entered, robe swishing, expression neutral. She reviewed the petition, the supporting statements, the attached affidavit. Her eyes flicked briefly in my direction. Then she said, "Mr. Hart, you're seeking temporary conservatorship over your mother's person and estate. That's a serious step. Why don't you tell me, in your own words, why you think this is necessary?" He rose, shot me a glance that could be read as concern if you didn't know how he looked when a deal was close to closing, and launched into his script. "My mother has always been stubborn," he began. "Lately, though, she's been making erratic decisions, talking about giving away significant portions of her savings to strangers, refusing help managing her property, ignoring basic safety concerns. She lives alone, far from family. She's vulnerable to predatory advisors." Denise's eyebrow twitched. He continued. "We had an incident at Christmas where she flew across the country unannounced, wandered our neighborhood alone in a snowstorm. I was on your doorstep," I murmured, not loudly enough for the judge, just for my own satisfaction, "and became very upset when we couldn't immediately rearrange our plans." He finished. His attorney handed up a neatly tabbed binder of evidence, notes from phone calls, an email in which I'd asked a question about a clause Denise had kindly explained in too much Latin, a photo of my single-story house with the caption, "Unsafe environment." When he sat down, the judge turned to Denise. "Miss Stanton," she said,
Denise stood, sliding the red folder on the podium. "Your Honor," she said, "we don't dispute that aging comes with challenges. What we dispute is the narrative that Mrs. Hart is incapable of managing her affairs. I'd like to enter into evidence a few items." She began with Dr. Patel's report and video. The judge watched the recording thoughtfully as I, on screen, answered rapid-fire questions and solved puzzles with more ease than most people demonstrate ordering coffee. Next came the bank footage. Ethan's attorney tried to object, but the judge overruled him. On the screen, my son filled out forms, shifting guiltily, glancing at the camera only once. "This," Denise said, "is Mr. Hart attempting to open a substantial line of credit using my mother's house as collateral, signing her name without her knowledge. The bank commendably flagged it as suspicious." She flicked to the next tab. "This," she went on, holding up a copy of the attempted loan application, "is where my client's signature appeared in someone else's handwriting." The judge peered over her glasses at Ethan. "Is that you in the video, Mr. Hart?" He swallowed. "Yes," he said, "but I—" "Thank you," she said. "We'll get that to you." Denise continued. "Here we have Mrs. Hart's long-standing financial records showing consistent, careful management of a diverse portfolio over 40 decades. Here is the recently established Hart Foundation, already fully funded, designed to support women re-entering STEM fields." She laid out the structure with practiced precision. "And here," she concluded, "is her updated will, executed before any of Mr. Hart's recent actions, appointing independent executors and specifically excluding him from management authority over her estate." She leafed through the pages. "Mrs. Hart," she said, addressing me directly for the first time, "could you stand for a moment?" I did. "How old are you?" she asked. 78, I said. "And how would you describe your current physical and mental health?" "Physically, my knees complain more than they used to," eliciting a small chuckle from the gallery. "Mentally, I remain fully capable of recognizing when someone is trying to stage a hostile takeover of my life." A ripple went through the room. Ethan's face flushed. Judge Morales sat back. "I've heard enough," she said. She denied the petition with a few crisp sentences, citing lack of evidence, clear conflicts of interest, and my impressive cognitive functioning. Then she did something I didn't expect. "Mr. Hart," she said, voice cooling, "given what I've seen of your behavior with your mother's financial information, I'm forwarding this file to the district attorney's office for review. Elder financial abuse is a serious matter. You may leave now." The gavel came down. The sound echoed like a door closing, not on me, as Ethan had intended, on him.
You might think that would be the end of the story. Court victory, son exposed, assets safe, roll credits fade out. Life rarely respects such tidy arcs. Winning in court gave me protection. It did not yet give me purpose. For a few weeks after the hearing, the days blurred. I watered my plants. I attended church. I taught 2 women from my neighborhood how to read their pension statements so they'd stop signing whatever the man from the insurance company put in front of them. Useful, yes, but the 29 million sat in accounts and instruments, humming quietly, like a generator waiting to be hooked to something. One afternoon, while cleaning out the hall closet, I found my old briefcase. It still smelled faintly of printer ink and ambition. Inside, at the bottom, under yellowed office memos and a dried-out pen, lay a stack of papers I'd almost forgotten. Copies of my earliest notes on fault-tolerance algorithms. I sat on the floor, papers spread around me, and remembered how it felt to design something that kept strangers alive. Not because they knew my name, because the system worked.
The Heart Foundation, as Denise and I had structured it, had 3 main branches: grants, scholarships, and special projects. So far, we had only filled out the legal skeleton. Now I wanted to put muscle on it. I took the papers to my kitchen table and opened a fresh notebook. At the top, I wrote, Project Christmas Control. Old engineers are sentimental. We like themes. Underneath, I outlined the idea. Partner with local community college to create a 1-year intensive program for women over 40 entering data science, fully funded, including childcare stipends and transportation. Include a financial literacy module specifically on how not to be robbed by your children. I emailed a dean I'd met once at a lecture. She remembered me immediately. Of course, Mrs. Hart, we'd be honored to host something like that. By spring, the first cohort of 20 women sat in a classroom with new laptops and nervous excitement. Some of them had never written a line of code. Some had once loved math and been told, "That's cute, but you'll be busy with kids soon." Watching them write their first hello world made me feel more powerful than any court ruling ever could. The local paper ran a story, Retired Engineer Funds Program for Late Bloomers in Tech. The article didn't mention my son. It didn't need to. Summer in Phoenix is like living in a hairdryer. I manage it by waking early, doing all my errands before 9, then retreating into the cool dimness of my house to read, think, and occasionally curse the power company when the bill arrives. One such afternoon, as I sat grading practice exercises for my students, old habits die hard. My phone buzzed with a New York area code I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then curiosity won. "Hello?" A hesitant voice answered. "Grandma?" My heart stuttered. "Mia?" "Yeah," she said, a little breathless like she ran up a flight of stairs. Sorry if this is weird. I got your number from Mom's old phone. She left it. Long story." I swallowed. "It's not weird," I said. "It's very, very welcome. How are you, sweetheart?" There was a small, wet snort on the line. "I've been better," she admitted. "Mom moved us to her parents' place in Connecticut for a while. Dad's staying in the city for work. That's what they say. But I hear them arguing on Zoom about money and lawsuits and stuff." "Ah, fallout." I kept my voice gentle. "I'm sorry you're caught in the middle." "I read about you," she blurted, "in an article. Someone shared it in my robotics club group chat. I saw your picture and I was like, wait, that's Grandma. But the name was different. You were important." I smiled, tears prickling hot. "I used my maiden name at work. Hart came later. It confused a lot of systems." "They said you made airplanes safer and that your work got taken. Is that true?" "Parts of it," I said carefully. "I worked on systems a long time ago that other people built on. That happens. I wasn't given credit for some of it, but that's changing." "Dad was mad about the article," she said quietly. "He said it made him look like a thief. I heard Grandma Lydia call you a vengeful old lady." "That's a lot of adjectives," I replied dryly. Mia giggled. "I don't think you're vengeful. I think you just got heard finally." Smart girl. "Are you mad at me?" she asked suddenly. "For not opening the door that night? I wanted to. Daddy told me to stay away from the windows." "Oh, Mia," I murmured. "No, never. You were a child obeying your parents. That's not something to be ashamed of. If anything, I'm proud that you still recognized me through the glass." Silence, then a relieved sniffle. Can I see you sometime? Mom says it's complicated, but I'm 14. I can take a train. My protective instincts flared. Let's not have you crossing state lines alone just yet, but your mother's right about one thing. The adult stuff is complicated. Still, we can make plans. Maybe there's a way I can visit that doesn't make anyone's lawyers nervous. You have lawyers? She asked, awed. Don't you? I teased. She laughed. For the next hour, we talked about her robotics projects, her favorite subjects, the teacher who told her girls usually struggle with circuits, and how satisfying it had been to ace his test. When we hung up, my cheeks hurt from smiling. At the bottom of that day's ledger page, I wrote, Data point. The next generation is not lost. Time moves differently when you're old. Months slide by like beads on a string you're no longer counting. Before I knew it, another December rolled around. The Hart Foundation's first cohort had graduated. 5 found jobs as junior data analysts. 3 started their own small tech support businesses. 1 proudly sent me a selfie from her new cubicle at a research lab with the caption, 53 and finally where I belong. The world outside my quiet desert house was still on fire in the usual ways. Politics, markets, the climate. Inside, things were calm. Then, one evening, as I sat wrapping presents for the ladies in my Bible study group, none of them needed anything, so I mostly gave them good chocolate. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number, the display said, but the area code was Ethan's. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? He sounded older, not just tired, but scraped thin. Hello, Ethan. I'm not calling about money, he said immediately, as if reading my mind, or paperwork, or anything like that. What then? I asked. He exhaled slowly. Mia wants you at her school's winter showcase. She's presenting some project about legacy systems, I think. Anyway, she put your name on the program as her guest. She says she already asked you, but she wanted me to make it official. I smiled beside myself. Yes, she texted me the details. I was planning to come. Oh, he sounded surprised. I thought, after everything. Ethan, I said, my relationship with my granddaughter is not collateral damage in our conflict unless you make it so. He was quiet a long moment. I won't, he said. I promise. There was a rustle, then his voice softened. I've been in therapy. Court mandated at first, then voluntary. I raised my eyebrows, though he couldn't see. Congratulations. Self-examination looks good on you. He huffed a laugh. My therapist says I've been chasing validation my whole life, building things so people would say I was brilliant, that I used you as a prop in that story, either as the angel who sacrificed everything for me or the burden who held me back. That sounds about right, I said. She also says I need to own what I did, quietly, fully, not I'm sorry but, just I'm sorry. The words hung between us like delicate glass. I'm listening, I said. He took a deep breath. I'm sorry I tried to control your life for my benefit. I'm sorry I signed your name without your consent. I'm sorry I shut you out of my house on Christmas so I can impress people whose names I can't even remember now. I'm sorry I made you feel small when you were the reason I ever got to stand in those rooms. My throat tightened. Therapists, I thought, earn every cent. I'm sorry, he repeated, voice cracking. I'm sorry because I lost you, not because I lost the money. I let the silence sit. I thought of the court, the bank, the porch light going off. I thought of my students, my roses, my granddaughter's eager voice. I realized something with surprising clarity. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. That's a good start, thank you. Does it change anything? He asked. Yes, I said. It changes something inside me. Legal documents, however, are not governed by feelings. He laughed a little wetly. I figured, Denise scares me, in a good way. I smiled. She scares everyone, that's why she's useful. We spoke a while longer about small, safe topics, the weather, his work at a community college teaching basic programming, his attempts at co-parenting peacefully. When we hung up, I felt lighter. Forgiveness, I realized, is not an acquittal. It's simply choosing not to carry someone else's guilt on your back. Mia's winter showcase took place in a crowded high school auditorium that smelled exactly like every school I'd ever visited. Faint disinfectant, teenage sweat, and burnt popcorn. I sat in the third row with a program in my lap. Under presenters, halfway down the list, my granddaughter's name glowed at me. Mia Hart, Project Legacy Systems, what my grandmother built. When her turn came, she stepped onto the stage in jeans and a blazer 2 sizes too big, her hair pulled back, eyes fierce. A slide appeared on the screen behind her, a black and white photo of me in my 20s, standing at a chalkboard covered with equations. Hi, she said into the microphone. My name is Mia, and this is my grandmother, Evelyn. For a long time, I thought she was just the lady who sent us crazy strong cookies at Christmas. Then I found out she used to write code that helped airplanes land safely. The audience murmured. She clicked the remote. Next slide, an old diagram from my Trinity archive, side by side with a modern software architecture chart. These are both control systems, she explained, one from the 1960s, one from now. My grandma helped design the one on the left. My dad's old company used something a lot like it on the right. For a while, no one knew where it came from. Now we do. I glanced at Ethan. He sat at the end of the row, hands folded, face pale but composed. He caught my eye and gave the tiniest nod. Mia went on to explain, with charming teenage gusto, how legacy code underpins most modern tech, how someone's invisible work decades ago becomes the skeleton of something shiny and new. She talked about acknowledgement, about credit, about the cost of being invisible. She taught me, Mia said in closing, that even if the world doesn't write your name down, the work still matters. But if you can, you should write your own name and other people's too. The audience applauded. She bowed awkwardly, face flushed, and walked off stage. After the program, we gathered in the lobby under fluorescent lights. Mia barreled into my arms like a much younger child. "Did you like it?" she demanded, pulling back to search my face. "I loved it. You explained redundancy better than half the professors I knew." She beamed. Ethan approached, hands in his pockets. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Hello, Ethan." He hesitated. "You look good, healthier than I remember." "Peace suits me," I replied. He nodded, eyes on the floor. "I know I'm not getting anything back. From the foundation, I mean. I'm not asking. But if you ever need help, I've been building some curriculum on ethics and software. Could be useful." I considered him. Once I might have said, "I don't owe you that chance." Now I thought of my ladies in the Late Bloomers program laughing as they traced their first loops and the way they leaned forward when we talked about saying no to their children's financial demands. "If Denise clears you, you can guest lecture. Pro bono." He huffed a laugh. "Of course," he said, "consider me an unpaid intern." "Don't flatter yourself. Interns are often more competent." He grins, and for a second I saw the boy who once cried because his Lego tower fell over. Mia threaded her arm through mine. "Want to see the robot we built?" she asked. "I'd be insulted if you didn't show me," I said. As we walked down the hallway, passing posters for clubs and dances and exam prep, I realized something. Revenge got everyone's attention, but what came after, the programs, the classes, the conversations, that was the real justice. A year later, on Christmas Eve, I stood in my own doorway, watching the sun bleed out over the desert. The house smelled of roasting turkey and cinnamon. My small artificial tree twinkled in the corner, decorated with ornaments I'd collected over 7 decades. On the kitchen table lay a tin of cookies, just like the one I'd carried to Ethan's townhouse 2 years before. Next to it lay another red folder. This one didn't hold transfer documents. It held reports, graduation rates, job placement stats, testimonials from women who'd gone from "I'm just a housewife" to "I deploy code now." My doorbell rang. It's a different sound from Ethan's, higher and cheerier. I opened it to find Mia on the porch, cheeks flushed from the mild cold, wearing a t-shirt that read, "Girls just want to have funs." Behind her stood Ethan, holding a modest duffel bag and an expression of cautious hope. "Merry Christmas, Grandma," Mia squealed, launching herself into my arms. "Merry Christmas, darling," I laughed, hugging her tight. Ethan cleared his throat. "May we come in?" he asked. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I stepped back. "Yes," I said simply, "you may." As they shrugged off coats and set bags down, I caught a glimpse of the past, the snow, the dark townhouse, the words, "Pretend we're not home." I let them pass through me like a shadow. In the living room, Mia gasped at the tree. "It's so cute, like one of those vintage magazine pictures. Can I—" "Go ahead," I said. "Presents are mostly boring grown-up things, but there might be 1 or 2 surprises." As she dove in, Ethan lingered by the kitchen table, eyes on the tin of cookies. "Those smell familiar," he said. "Same recipe, different audience." He winced. I deserved that. "Yes," I said, "you did." We stood in silence a moment, the clatter of Mia's enthusiasm behind us. "I know the foundation is your legacy now," he said quietly. "I'm glad. It's better than anything I would have done with it." "That's an accurate projection you've made in years." He laughed softly. "Probably." He sobered. "I still think about that night. Sometimes I wake up remembering the look on your face through the window." "I'm glad you remember. Memory is a good teacher." He said, "I don't expect you to ever forget, but I hope one day when people tell our story, that night won't be the only chapter they focus on." I thought of all the chapters since. Courtrooms and classrooms, phone calls and apologies, robots and research papers. "I'll let you know what title I settle on," I said. He smiled. "Fair enough." From the living room, Mia called, "Grandma, did you seriously get me a toolkit? This is awesome." I turned toward her voice. "Careful," I called back. "Those pliers bite." She giggled. Ethan and I joined her. We spent the evening eating too much and talking not enough, which is how first holidays after war should go. At one point, as Mia explained resistor color codes to Ethan, badly but with conviction, he looked at me over her head. "Thank you," he mouthed. I nodded. Not because I had given him anything material. Those doors remained closed. But because I had given him something else.
a chance to become a better man than the one who turned off the porch light.
Sometimes, late at night, after the dishes are done and the house has settled, I sit at my desk and flip through the old legacy plan drafts. Version 1.0, where Ethan inherited everything. Version 2.0, where the foundation took his place. Version 3.0, the current, which Denise jokingly calls Evelyn OS stable release. People think the most dramatic moment was when I walked away from his townhouse with $29 million still in my suitcase. They picture that as a cinematic scene: snow, swelling music, the quiet dignity of a woman reclaiming her worth. It was important, yes, but the real reclamation happened in smaller, less glamorous moments. The moment I told a banker, "No, I will not sign this today. My lawyer will review it." The moment I watched a 50-year-old woman in my class cry because she'd just written her first program and realized her brain hadn't rested, only been ignored. The moment Mia introduced me on stage as my role model, and I felt generations behind us straighten their backs. What I took back was not money. Money's just numbers in a ledger, electrons rearranged in a server somewhere. I took back authorship of my story, of my work, of my future. I always tell my students, a system behaves according to the rules you embed in it. If you let other people write all the rules, don't be surprised when you get outputs you hate. For years, I'd let my son, my employers, society at large write the rules. Stay quiet, be grateful, don't make waves. Hand over your expertise and don't expect credit. Hand over your money and don't expect respect. On that Christmas Eve, when he turned off the light, I realized something simple. I owned the code. I could rewrite it. If you've stayed with me this long, you might be wondering what any of this has to do with you. You might not have $29 million in secret stocks. You might not have built flight control systems or faced a courtroom. But maybe you've stood on a metaphorical doorstep. Maybe you've felt someone in your own family turn off a light when you rang. Maybe you've been called a burden, or confused, or too emotional when you insisted on being treated like a person, not a resource. Maybe you gave up a career, a dream, a part of yourself for someone else's comfort. And now, 40 years later, you catch yourself wondering, did I disappear? I am here in my small desert house with my slightly crooked Christmas tree and my overachieving roses to tell you this. You did not disappear. You were delayed. There is still time to rewrite your own code. You don't need a courtroom or a foundation. Sometimes rewriting starts with smaller steps. Opening your bank statement and actually reading it. Asking whose name is on the deed. Saying no when someone assumes your time, your money, your silence. Telling your grandchildren what you did before you were grandma. Writing down your story so nobody else can edit it out. I started a literal ledger. You can start a metaphorical one. On one side, list what people have taken. On the other, what you have built anyway. The math will surprise you. You are more than the version of you that shows up to babysit or bring casseroles. You are a system of experiences, skills, stories. Don't let anyone, not your children, not your spouse, not some condescending man in a bank, convince you that you are obsolete. Legacy systems in my world are often the most valuable. They hold everything together when the shiny new stuff crashes. Last week, a young journalist came to interview me for a podcast. She set up her microphones on my kitchen table, eyes bright, notebook open. "At the end of every episode," she said, "we ask our guests the same question. If you could go back and tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?" I thought of my 22-year-old self, hair pinned up, hands ink-stained, staring into the murky future of a career that would never fully acknowledge her. I thought of my 35-year-old self, balancing Ethan on one hip while stirring a pot with the other, wondering if she'd ever touch code again. I thought of my 50-year-old self, sitting in a bank lobby while a man in a suit explained basic interest rates to her as if she hadn't been compounding more complex formulas in her sleep. Then I smiled. "I'd tell her," I said, "to keep everything, every draft, every note, every proof, even if nobody wants to see them now, because one day someone will ask, 'Who built this?' And she'll need to be able to say, with evidence, 'I did.'" The journalist nodded, eyes shining. "And I'd tell her that revenge has a short half-life. It's satisfying at first, like a firework, but what really lasts is reclamation, taking back your narrative, using what they meant to break you as material to build something that outlives you." She asked me, "Do you regret anything?" "Of course," I said, "I regret not demanding more credit earlier. I regret underestimating my son's capacity for selfishness. I regret every time I smiled and said, 'It's fine,' when it wasn't." I looked out the window at the orange glow of the setting sun on my rose bushes. I said, "But I don't regret walking away from that townhouse, or calling Denise, or starting the foundation, or telling my story." I turned to the microphone. "And I don't regret not for a second choosing peace over proximity. Blood is not an automatic qualification to manage your heart or your bank account." This is the part where, if this were one of those shiny TV movies, everything would be wrapped up in a bow. Ethan would buy a modest house near mine. We'd have weekly dinners full of laughter and learning. Lydia would send apologetic holiday cards. The grandkids would Skype in from college, thanking me for their tuition. Real life is messier. Ethan still lives far away. He still messes up. Sometimes he cancels calls last minute because a student needed extra help. Sometimes old patterns tug at him and he starts to say, "You should really," before catching himself and laughing. We are not a Hallmark reconciliation. We are something better. Two adults, flawed and stubborn, choosing day by day to treat each other with more honesty than before. Lydia remains distant. That's fine. Not every character needs a redemption arc in your story. Nia sends me photos of the circuit she's building, the girls she's mentoring, the teachers she's gently challenging. "Grandma," she texted last week, "my club wants to name the new lab after you. Is that okay?" I wrote back, "Only if you spell it right." The foundation grows, slowly, deliberately. We don't chase headlines. We chase impact. The women in my Wednesday class still argue about whether Python is better than JavaScript. I let them because the argument itself means they've come a long way from "I'm too old for this." The 29 million is no longer a secret number in a broker's server. It's labs and laptops and legal workshops and bus passes for women who thought their commuting days were over. It's small, stubborn acts of reclamation multiplied. On my bedside table sits a framed quote Mia printed for me in clumsy calligraphy. She taught planes to land and women to rise. Some nights before I turn out the light,
I touch the frame and whisper to the girl I once was and the woman I became. They tried to write you out. We root you back in. And if you're listening to this on your phone while you fold laundry or in your car outside a house where someone takes you for granted, hear this from me. You can write yourself back in too. Start small, open a ledger, make a list, call a Denise, say no, say yes to yourself. And if the door you knock on this Christmas stays closed, turn around. There is always another house to build.
Thank you for listening to my story. If you'd like to hear more long, true-to-life grandma tales about betrayal, dignity, quiet revenge, and reclaimed legacy, make sure you like this video so more people find it. Subscribe to Grandma Tales Archive and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Because as long as I still have breath and working Wi-Fi, I'll be here, making sure the quietest women in the room finally get the last word.